to everyone in the room today. I look forward to spending the next hour with you looking at board orientation, and hopefully some of the information that I'm saying is not new. It's an opportunity for you to kind of reflect on what you've done with new board members and how you've done the orientation process and how effective it is. And basically the idea here is to give you again some more suggestions of how to tweak your existing board orientation process. So welcome, and I thank you for your participation. As was earlier mentioned, please feel free at any point to type questions in the chat box. I will try and get to it. If I do not, then they will be answered August 1st between 10 and 11 on the web org form. I just wanted to take an opportunity to let you know that we've gone through 4 other series prior to this one. We've dealt with the legal duties of the board, the responsibilities of the board. We've also done the relationships between the board and executive director. We've looked at recruitment of board members, and today we're going to take a look at orientation. The resources are as posted on the OrgWise website, so I've also given you the link so that you can go there at your leisure to check out some of the wonderful resources that's available on governance and strategic training. So thank you again for joining us, and let's get started. So today's objective is basically to look at the orientation process before election or after appointment, to understand board orientation and why it's important, to look at what should be included in the board orientation and the process in itself, to explore timeline. So what is your timeline around your orientation? Is it something that you do right at election, or is it something you do prior to a nomination and election? To look also at what should be included in a comprehensive board manual. Again, the questions that you pose are confidential, so at any point feel free to ask for clarification or pose a question to any of the issues that are being raised. Before we get started, I wanted us to all be on the same page around the definitions that we use when we are talking about issues specific to the board. So if you're new to this, and I've noticed that there are quite a few board members and executive directors in the room, so as an end result, most people already have these definitions down pat. But I just wanted to see that we're all operating on the same plane when it comes to our understanding of these particular definitions. So looking at the board of directors, it's basically individuals who are elected by shareholders of a corporation to manage a corporation, business, and appointed, so they're appointed officers, basically. Executive officers, again, they're also board members who are appointed, so most of the position that is involved in sitting on a board, you have to go through the appointment process via an interview with the executive director, the chair of the board, nominating committee. So I'm not going to go through every single definition. I'm basically going to go through the ones that most likely be used on a day-to-day basis. So when we say committee, what exactly do we mean by committee? So it's an extension of the board. So depending on the issue and depending on the need, the chair may ask the board to strike a committee to deal specifically with a specific issue, and will frame the timeline around how long that committee exists. So sometimes the committee is a standing committee and they exist for the duration of the board. Other times it's a committee that's formed to deal specifically with one issue and bring a recommendation back to the larger board. Policy, basically the principle that's designed to influence decisions, action. Typically, policy designates a required procedure or a process within an organization. There are often rules of practice or procedures which supplement the Constitution and bylaws. So when we talk about policy, that's exactly what we're talking about. So if you're a new board member and you're not coming from within the sector or social service, some of these terminology may be new to you. I think budget is self-explanatory, audit is self-explanatory, financial statement, income statement, balance sheet, assets, liability. The piece that may be new for a lot of people is the piece around liability insurance, specifically how it governs the legality of board involvement. So one of the things as a new board member you should understand is the liability insurance for the time that you will be serving on that particular board. So if something was to happen, how do you get legal representation as a board member? Equity, very big word that is used on a regular basis, especially in the sector, and sometimes I think it's misunderstood when we use equity. It's amount that a business is worth beyond what it's owed. So when we're talking about equity in this context, we're not talking about it from the safe, inclusive, harassment policy as in equality. We're talking equity as in the value of the assets that's within an organization. Strategic planning, another one that is usually very big and something that should be done at the beginning of every new board. So as you are a new board member, one of the things that should happen is within the first month that there should be a strategic planning session to bring everyone online with the short-term and long-term goals of what you're going to achieve. That should be part of the orientation process. The same as the operational plan is setting out clear guidelines around what will be achieved within your terms. And I found most of these definitions in Webster's Dictionary or Wikipedia, so if you want to get more information, you too can do the Google thing and update your knowledge base on it. And I think it's important that we enter this with that shared vision or the shared understanding of these terminologies. So what is board orientation and why do we need it? So board orientation is a process to thoroughly provide board member with precise information they will need on their role. When you join a board, you're given a job description, and within the job description it should clearly state what the duties will be. The orientation is to give you an opportunity to get clarification on those duties, to find out the parameters of those duties and what exactly are you going to be responsible for. So that's why you do board orientation, is to ensure that the process of being a board member is clearly and precisely explained to new members. So the purpose again of orientation is to provide important information about the organization, the roles and responsibility that you'll be undertaking. It helps to also build a working relationship between the members, because for new members you're a little bit intimidated or you're a little bit scared because especially if they are returning members, they have a little bit more knowledge than you will have on the issues or the organization. So this is an opportunity for you to kind of form working relationship and also promote ongoing support. So who within the board can you turn to when you're dealing with new contentious issue? And I talk a little bit later on about mentorship and how it should work in the orientation process. And this is an opportunity for people in themselves to kind of start that process. So I want to frame the contents of this presentation around what do you and members of your board need to know to be a good board member. So as we're going through this, that's kind of what I want you to be thinking for the next hour. What do you need? So if you don't already have that capacity, what more do you need? And if you're going to be doing orientation for oncoming board members, what do you think they will require in order for them to be the famous terminology, hit the ground running, or to do the job to the best of their ability? So the first thing is you've got to recognize that the members will have different interests and expertise because they're coming from different backgrounds. So from member to member, what you're going to find is that some people will have a clear and concise idea about what it is you do in the community, and some of them will be fresh off the boat and they will not have any idea of what the organization is. They just have an interest in helping the organization grow. So therefore, at the beginning, what should happen is you should hold a meeting with the chairperson, president, executive director, and new board members to set standards, to talk about conduct, and to basically say, what are we going to be achieving within the term that you're going to be here? You get to highlight the vision and what you're about to undertake. And you need to do that in a way that engages new member. It's a very onerous thing to step on a board, especially when you know that the financial success or the financial growth of the organization is dependent on you, as well as growth of that organization is dependent on what the board members do. So I think for new board members, it is important that they feel comfortable as quickly as possible. And the way for them to feel comfortable or at ease is by providing them with information and gradually introducing them to the organization. And the way to do that is not just to do it at the time of appointment, but I think it's something that should be done as soon as someone is identified that they want to be on a board. You should start the education process of your organization. So developing effective orientation for new members, basically the purpose is to develop a process to provide board members with precise information about their roles, to provide important information about the organization. So what does the organization do? How long have they been in existence? What issues have they dealt with in the past? What contentious issues they're currently dealing with? Is there any issues around funding crisis that they're dealing? What community do they serve? And what projection does that organization have for the future? Those are all part of an orientation for new members. It's also to build working relationship with the members, the new and old. It gives them an opportunity to kind of see what skills, what expertise is around them and how they're going to be supported. To also, again, as I just said, promote ongoing support and to agree on operational standards. One of the key pieces as a new board member is to understand how the process of the day-to-day functionality of a board happens. What happens at a meeting? How are decisions made? How are votes made? What type of board are you? And how does the reporting between staff and board executive director happen? What happens in the community with board members in regards to dealing with issues? They become the face of the organization. So the more information that they have, the easier it is for them to speak on issues when asked what is the mandate or vision of a particular organization. All of this has to be a part of the orientation. Because remember, if you're an organization that's been in existence for 20 or 30 years, any new board member has to incur the knowledge of those 10, 20 years. And in order for them to be able to do justice to the organization, there has to be a way for them to get that information in a timely manner to help move the process forward within, if it's a 2-year term, you do not want to spend 2 years reading a manual so that you can understand the history. That's one of the reasons why it's important to have a good working relationship between the chair and the executive director, because the likelihood is the executive director has been around longer than even the chair. So that person has the historical integrity of the organization, and you want to utilize them in the orientation. Or a senior staff member may also serve that as well. So orientation serves the point of answering the following questions. And I remember when I was a new board member, these are the things that I wanted to know before I embarked on my journey of being a member. So what skills and knowledge did the other people around the board have? Not just what was I bringing, but what did they have? What did I need to note, and what did I have to learn in order to make me an effective, active board member? The function of the board. Were we a policy board? Were we advisory board? Were we a management board? I needed to understand that as well. The operational principles. So basically, how do we make decisions? And when things are done, who carries those decisions out? What resources are available to me? And what training would be provided to me to help me to do my job? How often does the board meet? There's nothing worse than being asked to be a board member. You go through the process, and lack of information has that you're meeting 3 or 4 times a month, and then you realize that you hadn't asked the right question because it hadn't been presented to you, and then you're stuck in a situation where you're not able to fulfill your duties. So I think it's equally important that you know how often the meetings will be and how long those meetings will be. Is it 2 hours? How often will you have a 3-hour meeting? How often will you have weekend sessions? With whom do you communicate, and how will that communication happen? So is it through internet? Is it in face-to-face? Like, what are the different technology that will be used to do communication? If you're sick and you want to be involved in a board discussion, for instance, you're voting on something, is it possible to sit in at, via Skype. So all of those things that you need to know at the beginning. Communication makes or break how you access resources. How do you run meetings? You know, is it a consensus? Is it a dictatorship? Is it we agree to disagree? How do you actually run meetings? Is there an agenda? How the agenda decided? Who sends out the agenda? How often is the agenda sent out? How are minutes taken? And what happens when those minutes are taken? Where are they stored? All of those things you want answers to before you get there. You also want to know that if you needed legal advice via the financial statement or a contentious issue within the organization, where do you get that? Do you have it in-house, or do you already have a legal firm that is attached to your organization for the board to get legal advice? When you're doing planning and financial advice around the growth of the financial integrity of an organization, how do you do that? If you're not a financial analyst, then what support do you have in order for you to do financial projection for the organization with the executive director? What's the legal responsibility of a board? So after I finish serve, am I done, or do I still have legal responsibility for what I've done? And how long does that legal responsibility last? Again, and how will you make decisions and solve problems? So if a conflict is presented amongst the members, how do you resolve that? Do you bicker until it's done, or do you have a form in which conflict resolution process is practiced? So I think as a new board member, if you're able to answer most of these issues, you're going to find that people will be able to slip into the position a lot easier, because this gives them a parameter of what's to be expected as members. So develop a board orientation timeline as well. How the scope of this orientation. Is it a week? Is it 2 weeks? Is it a month? Is it a year? What is the timeline, and what do you do within the specific points, achievement points? So at the beginning, what is achievable at the beginning? What is achievable in the middle? There has to be a way for you to measure that. So by setting a timeline, you're then able to do that. Again, please feel free to type in any questions you may have or suggestions, and I'd gladly share it with the forum. I appreciate that feedback. So during the recruitment stage, I'm a firm believer that the recruitment should happen, you know, an ongoing basis throughout the year. And if you check the presentation that I did on recruitment, you'll get a little bit more information about why I believe that recruitment should happen before way before the election. So this is, I'm talking about in the recruitment phase, you should also provide printed material, have a face-to-face meeting. This is all part of orienting the new potential board member. Provide an overview of the organization, what the vision, the mission, goals are, what programs and services, and a little bit of background about that information. So you're given a bird's eye view of the organization before that member is actually on board. So it's a way for them to kind of get a perspective of what they will be dealing with and what areas they themselves may need to go get educated on. Also outline expectation of board members. What do you expect of me when I join the board? So how many meetings am I going to have to do within my 2 or 5 years? Are there committees, and do I have to sit on it? Is it a must that I am a part of a committee, or do I opt out? My decision or my opinion is that every board member should be part of a committee. It's not an option. It should be an expectation. The length of term, you know, am I serving 1 term? Am I serving 2 terms? Again, I've said 25 years is too long for anyone to be on a board, but 2 to 5 years may be the ideal for you in order for you to achieve the goals and objective of that particular organization. The idea of time commitment. So if I'm supposed to meet twice a week, am I expected to do anything else outside of that time commitment that you've dictated? And what exactly would you expect? The type of board, what type of board are you, as I've mentioned before, so that you understand the relationship between the executive director, the board, and the staff, so that there's no gray areas in how you function. And I think this is also the biggest piece of orientation, is to make it clear that, you know, a board member, depending on the type of board that you have, do not have any interaction on the day-to-day piece with staff, and that needs to be clearly understood. So again, if you're policy collective, governance, or management board, then that also needs to be explained. This is when expectations and needs have to be clarified. So this is when you're trying to say, are you the best fit for the organization? So that should be the I will call it a pre-orientation. So I've come forward and I say I'm interested in being on your board in January. Elections do not happen until late September. You're going to provide me with the following information, and you're going to touch base with me and as a way to kind of engage me. Once you've given me this information, I can go off and I can read about your organization and decide, okay, this is something I want to follow up with. It also gives me an opportunity to go and get some of the training that I may not currently have in order for me to sit and be an effective board member. Okay? So I'm giving you a sample here of a simple, quick reference. Instead of giving a board member in the beginning stage the entire manual and asking them to read it, because the bottom line is this. If you give me something that is, say, 5 or 10 pages that highlights the organization as a potential member, I'm more likely to read it. If you gave me the whole manual, 150 pages, as a board member, I have so many other things to do, and when I come, the expectation is hit the ground running. I may never get through that 150 pages. So we don't want a novel. We really basically want to give, this is a quick reference. Later on, you have an opportunity to give the board the more in detail manual. But I think as part of your orientation at the beginning stage, there should be a quick reference handbook. And walk the members through the content of it before you give it to them. It should be comprehensive, it should be concise, and please make it easy to read. The technical jargon piece, if you're going to use technical jargon, have a section that have definition so I can refer to those definitions and making it easier for me to understand. So include in it sample of promotional material, brochure, newspaper clip-ins. If you also have videos that are listed on site somewhere that I can go watch about your organization, then give me the links to that. Within this reference manual, it should have a description of the vision, mission, and goal. It should, again, define commonly used terms. There should be an organizational chart. So basically, are you a top-down approach? Are you a bottoms-up approach? Is it a grassroots? Is it volunteer organization? So give me terminology so that I can, again, know when you say that you're a collective within an organizational chart, I understand what that means, okay? Give me descriptions of programs and services. So what do you offer to the community and how do you do it? Give me terms of reference for the committees I'm going to be sitting on, as well as the positions within the board. Give me explanation or give me a description of the staff structure. And describe to me who holds the major roles within the organization. Give me a list of committees with standards and purpose for each. Give board policies related specifically to the policies in the manual. If there are new policies that are under review and they haven't yet been voted on, you may not want to include that in this particular reference book. Explain about director's liability insurance. So if I'm on the board for 2 years and 2 years after I've served, I'm still legally liable for the decisions I've made. So talk about that, how I can access that liability insurance if I'm sued. So that's, again, should be in a quick explanation. Procedures for meetings, Robert's Rule of Order, is that how you operate? So this quick reference book is, you've taken out pieces from the more in detail manual and you've given it to members at the orientation stage again, so that they're the beginning of the orientation stage, which is part of the recruitment when you know that this person is definitively interested in the organization. Excuse me. So basically the journey that you're about to undertake is a long, year-long recruitment journey that leads from the moment that person shows interest into the organization to the moment they are elected, serve, and leave the organization, including the exit interviews that you do. An exit interview is also part of the follow-up to orientation. So if someone is leaving halfway through the process, you need to ensure that you're doing a follow-up to find out why exactly are they leaving. So before you get started, one of the things that you're looking at is, what is the current makeup of the board? What skills and expertise currently exist? What skills and expertise are missing? Because that's the parameter that you're going to use to recruit new members, right? Within 2 to 3 months before the final term, you also start to look at those members being invited to fundraising events, different functions that you may have, so that they get an opportunity to kind of see a little bit more about the organization. So you invite them and you provide them with the newsletter, or you provide them with a brochure, or you provide them with a program. You give them an opportunity to have a quick reference to what you do in the community. You start the interviewing process probably a month or 2 before the election. So people have submitted their resume, they said they're interested, they start meeting the criteria, you invite them to an interview, and then in that you basically go through any updated resources. You give them stuff that, again, helps them to make the decision that they really do want to be on the board. Because once the interview process is started, that person has committed themselves to the process, and you want them to stay to the end. You want them to actually get to the place where you can get to the AGM, put their name forward, and then appointments are made, right? And that's only going to happen by providing information. The more information you provide up front, the less work you will have to do at the back. Okay? And what I mean by that is, if I have a clear understanding of how everything functions at the beginning, then I'm more likely to come on being a very informed board member, and I'm ready to do the work at hand. So the orientation session, when you do it a few weeks before the appointment or after the appointment, is that, so you have gone through the AGM, the person has been elected, then the executive director and the chair of the board needs to work closely in providing orientation to the new board members, and that's in the form of a meeting. One of the most successful boards I've ever sat on, I remember about 3 months into my interest. I hadn't yet been voted in as a board member. I got a call from the current chair of the board basically letting me know that there was a function going on in the community and would I be interested in participating, and sent me supplementary information about why this particular event was happening in the community. And I remember thinking, what a welcoming way, what a way to make me feel welcome. And I wasn't yet even a board member, and it showed me that they actually wanted and they actually cared that I had information about what the organization do, what the boards are involved in. And I know for a fact that was one of the reasons why I continued, even though it was months away before my election, the election happened. So conduct the orientation session for the entire board, not just the new board member. And I'll tell you the reason why I think it's important to do that. Because it gives the existing board member an opportunity to talk a little bit of the journey they have just gone through. It gives the new board member kind of a highlight of what they could expect as new members. And it's a perfect opportunity for more sharing to occur. And the more opportunity that the existing board and the new members have to share, the better fit that will happen once you come on board. So the strategic plan around board orientation, after the candidate is brought onto the board, the orientation continues. Try not to overwhelm people by giving them all the information within the first board meeting. You would want to have a strategic planning session that lasts probably about a half day, and that would be a good opportunity for you to kind of map out the future for the next term. It's an opportunity again for you to also provide supplementary information in a non-stressful environment, because during the board meeting it can get pretty stressful, and that's not the time that you want to be getting, this is how the organization functions and this is the programs that run. So you want to kind of introduce the resources gradually. Having said that, I think that the board members are responsible for a lot of their own learning. So have the information available if you have that one or two board member who want to read ahead. You know, if they want the whole supplementary plus the manual, have it made available to them. But what I'm saying to you is try not to overwhelm them in the first couple of meetings, because that's when you're going to have people who would want to walk away because they're just so overwhelmed and they cannot see themselves in that position. So before, as I said, have a meeting before the first meeting of the board with all of the members so that they have a sense of, you know, how the organization, run and what they can expect. Provide them with a detailed board manual. So again, within the second meeting or the third meeting, you can start saying, okay, here's the board manual. Remember at the beginning I gave you the reference piece, so the sections that was on the reference piece is in more detail in the manual, and encourage them to actually take a look at it. And one of the things that I may suggest is that give them specific questions that they have to know or answer within the manual. So for instance, have information sheets that people have to go through and say, define stuff. They have to understand, like, how does a meeting run? So they have to go and look that up within the board manual. Because if you don't give them ways to engage them in the manual, it'll just become a resource that's not used. It's not utilized. And the reason that it was developed is that it's a tool of education for new members. So you want new members to actually take in that opportunity to go and do the reading of the manual. Have discussions to review the involvement of the committees again. Go over the job description. And this is a time for you to really look at the duties and give more information about the duties, the expectation, confidentiality, all of that stuff starts to come up in this section. And it's really important to explain this up front, especially the thing around code of conduct, conflict of interest, and confidentiality. Those three areas need to be brought right at the table. First meeting needs to be reviewed. How the board operates, I think that's something that the chair needs to do with the first meeting. Give a bit of orientation and allow an opportunity for discussions between the chair and the new board. I think one of the things that I found very beneficial when I sat as the chair of a couple of boards is that after the strategic planning, I gave the board members homework. And basically, the homework was just to kind of, after the strategic session, tell me what skills you now feel you had to bring to the plan of action that we had. And I took those skills, and when we were doing committee, voting for committee members, then it was easy for me to kind of guide the process to get individuals to volunteer specific for committee based on their interests. Okay, so I think that's an opportunity where the chair gets to stand up and kind of take a leadership, more of a leadership role is in that kind of acquisition of knowledge, passing it on. There should be a solid match between the interests of the organization and the skills of the members that you're bringing on. If there isn't, then you might want to actually say to that person, thank you, but no thanks. Because it's not good enough to just have members who want to sit around, you know, the board. You want to have members who are going to help you move the organization forward. In a time of change, you need to have skilled members around you. And those are the members that you're going to lead on when funding difficulty arises, to start looking at different opportunities to secure funding for the organization. Or if you have to do a strategic plan around the program, why it needs to continue and exist, you need to have members who are then able to do that. So orientation helps you to kind of get a better grasp on what skills are actually around you. So in the orientation process, the first meeting, have each board member introduce themselves, have each member talk about what they're bringing to the board, what is their background, what they hope to get. Give them updated information about the board. For instance, if you're in the middle of a lawsuit, this is an opportunity for you to let that new board member know about the lawsuit. If you are in a contentious situation where the executive director is about to be fired or the senior staff is about to be. Those are things that you need to, as a chair, bring new board members up to par on, because you do not want to have the fallout of having to deal with contentious issues within the organization and having half of the board not be aware of what those issues are. Because you're still culpable, you're still responsible for any decisions that that is made. So whether you know about it or not, you're still responsible for it. Because once you've signed that letter of commitment that you are a board member and you've been appointed, then you inherit the history of the organization. So that's why it's important that they get up-to-date information. And this should be done face-to-face. It shouldn't be something that's sent out in an email. It should be something that's done within the very first meeting. And this first meeting should be a meeting with just the members of the board. We talk about in-camera meeting, or we talk about an opportunity where the board can speak frankly. This is when you would say have an in-camera meeting, closed meeting, where you ask the executive director or other members to excuse themselves and you're able to talk frankly about issues that you're currently dealing with and give honest feedback to new members. And make them feel comfortable, make them feel welcome. One of the things that I used to do is put a welcome letter in the orientation package, and personalize it. Okay? Have new members present, as I said, present their skills. You want to know their experience. You want to know if they've sat on boards before. You want to know, what do they want to do with this organization? How are they going to help the organization move forward? If you're talking about fundraising as a big part of your board's mandate, how are they going to help secure funding? What access do they have in the community that helps the organization get and achieve their goal? So again, provide the evolution of the organization. So if you started off in the basement of a church and over the period of time you've been able to get funding as an organization and that you've moved to a storefront, how did that transpire? That's also something that is necessary for new board members to understand. You have a very short window of opportunity to actually engage the board members in the beginning, and I think if you neglect that in the beginning, you will find that you will have ineffective board members. All the boards that I've sat on, that I have been most active during my time there, has been boards that have engaged me at the beginning by giving me a lot of information to help me understand the process, to understand the procedures, to understand the policy, to understand why the policies were designed, to understand the day-to-day functionality of the executive director and staff. And therefore, I was able to respect those roles and bring more education or more value to those positions by highlighting stuff within the board that helps support those roles. So I think as an educated board member, and when I say an educated board member, what I mean is somebody who thoroughly understands why the board exists within a particular organization, you are then able to serve, and it's less stressful for you, because if you know the mandate of an organization, when issues are brought forth by the staff, you will understand why those issues are there. Roles and responsibility of the staff, the executive director, and it's important to understand this because you want to make sure that there are not too many overlapping or unclear lines of responsibility between those positions, because you don't want a board to be making decisions about a program should now include an orientation session for newcomers, for instance, that involves an orientation package. That's not a functionality of the day-to-day piece of a board. But talking about the orientation package and the content of it and why we need it around program advancement may be a discussion that one of the committee wants to have. So it's important that we understand, where does the board's job end and where does the staff start, and where are there possibilities for overlapping and what happens when that overlapping happens, right? So who decides how the communication is going to happen? Usually that falls to the executive director when there's overlapping between the executive director and the chair of the board. Again, I talked earlier about mentorship. I think for new board members, Mentorship is key to success. So assign a senior board member to tutor the new members. So that one person is responsible for probably 2 or 3 months to just shadow that individual. So if they have questions or concerns, they can then call that one person, email that one person and say, okay, at the meeting these particular issues came up and I wasn't quite clear. Can you give me a little bit more perspective on what was going on? Or it's just another resource for a new member to just know that they have a lifeline. So if something comes up that they're really struggling with, it's a way to get some support from a member within the board. And nothing better than having a senior member who knows the integrity or know the history of the organization be assigned to a newer member. You know, incorporate team building exercise as part of the orientation. Those team building exercises is an opportunity for, again, for you to move the agenda forward, to get some of the issues on the table, but it's also a way for you to kind of get people to ask questions, because I don't know about you, but I know I've sat on a lot of boards in the beginning where a lot of new members don't ask questions. And it's not that they don't have questions, it's that they're intimidated by the process, and it takes them a while to sit in and feel comfortable. So as an end result, that's why some of them do not ask questions. So if you have new board members who are not asking questions, who are not participating, as the chairperson of a board, your responsibility is to say, okay, something here is not right, and part of the orientation may not have happened in a timely manner to help prepare that person. So this is where you as the chair of the board would be reaching out to that person to say, how can we engage you? What is necessary to help you feel more comfortable? And basically find out, are they not participating because they are intimidated by the process, or are they not participating because they're in the listening phase of participation? Okay? And then make sure, again, you provide a tour of the facilities. If you have umbrella sites, take them to the various sites. Let them see the office. Let them know the organization. If the executive director or the president or the chairperson is available, let them be involved in that tour. If they cannot, make sure it's a senior member who can answer questions for that may arise in it. I say second meeting, but again, you can gauge it. The second meeting could be 2 months, 3 months down the line. Provide the detail manual, as I've said before. Arrange a meeting between new members and key members again. So you've done it in the beginning, continue to do that. Within the first 3 months of joining the board, there should be a lot of communication between the key members. So when I say key member, executive director, chair of the board, senior staff, there should be a lot of interaction happening there. Try to have it maybe an hour before the board meeting, a half an hour before the board meeting, because again, you don't want to be taxing the staff by adding a lot on their plate, but you also want to feel that you can provide contact with the agency for new members. Again, we talked about committee involvement. Again, go over that again, more information. Have the old board members do presentation about issues that have outstanding issues. So when you inherit a board, one of the things that you should also inherit is a list of issues that have not been completed by the previous board, because those are the issues you're going to start right off the bat working on, so you should know them right off the bat. So ask to have those prepared, and basically they're handed out, and it gives each board member an opportunity to kind of see where you're going. The more information you provide via the manual or supplementary information, the more informed a new board member is and the more active they will be. So again, comprehensive manual, copy of the organizational constitution and bylaw, terms of reference for all committees, the organization most recent strategic planning and operational plan, a list of board members and their contact, a list of staff and their contact. Sorry, I duplicated that twice, so it's important that you have it. Full job description of each staff position as well as each board position. The content of the manual should basically be easy to read. And here include again sample proportional material. I've gone over this one before, so it's just again to say, organizational description, definitions that is commonly used in the sector, organizational chart, program description, service, board's role, job description of board member, terms of reference for executive committee, staff structure and roles, list of committee with statement of purpose, board policy, reference manual, liability insurance, and meeting procedures. So all of that is included in the larger manual in detail. Sample roles and responsibility. This is just to basically give a board member a bird's eye view of when I step on the board, what is expected of me. So I'm expected to understand the mission, the vision, the value, the direction the organization is going. I'm also needing to understand the philosophy and how it has evolved. Strategic planning. I need to develop one for the next 2 years. If my term is 2 years, I need to develop one for the next 5 years with interim measures as well. I need to know the programs and service. How many programs does the organization have? What service do they provide? I also need to know that I have to do evaluation. I have to evaluate the board and I have to evaluate the executive director. I need to also talk about and know the financial health of the organization. Where are we going? Where are we currently? I need to also know the human resource piece around the organization. You're also responsible for the working conditions of the organization, so you should know what is happening within the organization. You're responsible for hiring the executive director, so you need to know how to do that and how to evaluate senior staff. You're also responsible for the sustainability and of the membership. So as the chair in particular, if members are dropping like wildfire, you need to know why that is, and you need to then take on the responsibility to change what's not working. You also need to ensure that there's a nominating committee so that the next time you need board members, that process is already ingrained in the orientation piece. You also need to ensure that the work is done effectively and concisely, and you have to oversee the structural piece. So take an opportunity after I'm finished with reviewing these roles and responsibility. If you haven't already done so, I please recommend that you as the executive director highlight it to the chair of the board, and you, the chair of the board, highlight it to the members of the board, because it's important that they know that. In the policy and procedure piece of the board, code of conduct, as I talked about earlier, oath of confidentiality, abuse and harassment policy, safe and inclusive space, inclusivity, the Accessibility Act, all of those things needs to be part of it. Conflict of interest, what is it? Reimbursement, do you reimburse for transportation within the board? Do you give petty cash for board members to purchase stuff? Nominating committee, how does that work? Financial statement, who signs checks, and how are the requisitions made for that? Insurance, I talk about liability, risk management strategy, media relations, who does it and how is it done? Is there a template for how it's done? Is there a specific person within the organization? All of that needs to be understood, and that's why you're doing it. The financial information, make sure that you have the most current updated audit item financial statement. Give a current copy of the budget. Give the most recent annual report. Give the most recent income statement. Also, the goals for the projected goals for the upcoming year. Copy of previous minutes. Where are the minutes held? So that I can access those minutes and read, how decisions was made. And basically work plan that the board has had, you want them to also have a copy of that, including, who was involved in that. One of the mistakes that we need is that in minutes taken is that the individuals are not documented who passed the decision, who abstained from voting. Those things needs to be documented so that when I, as a new board member, is reading about how that decision, I know exactly how the process happened. The letter of commitment is signed, and it needs to be part of the file for any new board member. So that's something that has to be signed, returned with the roles and responsibility. And here is a checklist of for the chair or the executive director, if they're doing the orientation, to go through and basically say, have you completed all of the following information? And once you have done it, then it's a checklist thing to also the new member to say, this is what I'm responsible for within my time within the organization. I will post this checklist on the forum on Thursday so that you can have an opportunity to go through again and actually see the, the general information, what are the content, the roles and responsibility, the policy and procedure, the financial management piece, and other information. So I will post this on the forum so that you, if you don't have your own checklist, I suggest that you design a checklist at the beginning of the orientation manual, and once each section has been checked off by the board member, one of the things that I used to ask board members is to show me the manual, and I would then initial it to make sure that, yes, they actually have read it, because as the chair I felt responsible for the learning of new board members, and this was my way to ensure that they actually were taking on that responsibility of reviewing the manual. So one of the things that I want to say is it is not okay to lean only on the executive director or the senior staff to provide resources for the board. I think the chair of the board is responsible for the education of any new board members, and having a recruiting committee that has set the policy and procedure for how you recruit becomes key, because that is the committee that's going to oversee the whole orientation process. Those are the individuals who are going to make sure that any new board member is brought up to speed. Those are the individuals who are going to answer outstanding questions and ensure that board members feel connected and committed to the organization. I sat on a board a couple of years back, and I remember halfway through my term being very frustrated because we were not on par with the mission of the organization. And we weren't on par because the lead person on the chair wasn't on par with their learning. So as an end result, the meetings were very disorganized. The whole process was very disorganized. I don't think we achieved half of what we could have. Had I had a better orientation at the beginning, I think I wouldn't have sat through as many meetings being frustrated, because I would have understood my roles, my responsibility, and I would have known who within the board was responsible for helping me to get more information and understand that. As an end result, I remember when I left the board, I felt very frustrated with myself because my time there, I didn't feel as though I had given the betterment of the knowledge and skills that I could bring to a particular organization. So in keeping with that, I would want to say, anyone who takes on the responsibility of orientation, it is your responsibility to ensure that the new members have the resources available to them. And the resources can also come in the form of sending them off to online learning. So using OCASI's membership org-wise resource to help your board, or using Maitri, or using the broadband report, or using Pillar to Post nonprofit organizational guidelines. There are a lot of resources out there to help you, to help your board become more efficient. As the chair, that is part of your role, because your board is only as effective as you are. So in keeping, I would like to say thank you. My name again is Yolande. The next session is on Code of Conduct, Ethics, and Evaluation of Boards, Staying on the Right Path. The Q&As for this session will be Thursday, August 1st, 10 to 11. I hope that I will see some of you in the forum, and I welcome any questions that may arise between now and then. As I said, I was going to post a checklist, and I will also post a couple of other resources specific to orientation or orientation manual design. I'm sure most of you do have an orientation process in place. All I'm saying is, if you don't have one that is effective, this is the time to step up and take the cobweb off the manual and make it more a day-to-day functionality of each board meetings. Bylaws, constitutions were developed for a reason, and it is part of the governance of how you run a meeting and how you run a board. So if you have them in a book and no one is reading that 150 pages of the manual, then maybe it's time for the board to take the responsibility of revamping your board manual. So I thank you again, and I look forward to seeing you on Thursday.
Thank you very much, Joanne. Just remember, Thursday, August 1st, on the OrgWise site at www.orgwise.ca, there will be there's a lot of other resources available also that Yolande has kindly put up within the same topic. So once again, thank you, Yolande, and we will hopefully see you all on Thursday.